Amazing. I'm Ike Hecht, lead project manager at WikiTech and also lead project manager at WikiWorks. Welcome everyone to sunny Boca Raton, Florida, where the temperature right now is 72 degrees and air conditioned. That's because in South Florida, we're in basically a full lockdown, like many of you. For those of you who don't know what that is, that's when an administrator gets really frustrated and decides to lock everyone out of viewing the main namespace, and also that they're not allowed to leave their home. Thankfully, the current rules say that I'm allowed to go to my office, which helps me maintain my relative sanity. So as I mentioned, I work for two companies, WikiWorks and WikiTech. They do basically the same thing. You can call that killing one bird with two stones, except that we don't kill any birds. Instead, we install, improve, support, and maintain MediaWiki. I've been working with MediaWiki for well over a decade, and I've done pretty much anything you can do with it, from writing lots of useless extensions to writing lots of very useless extensions and everything related and in between. We're going to be talking about wiki maintenance. Nobody does it. Everybody should, but nobody does. Maintaining your wiki properly means it will do nothing better when you're done than it did before you got started, which is really boring. In fact, the only thing worse than doing maintenance is hearing someone talk about it for half an hour. But the good news is that this year's conference is remote, so if you don't like the presentation, you can walk out unnoticed or hammer away feverishly at your keyboard, and nobody will know the difference this year. Maintenance is so boring and so easy to push off indefinitely that if you don't have someone dedicated to doing your maintenance for you, it won't get done. The easiest and most reliable way is to pay someone else to do it, and that's where I come in. There are companies that pay me to do their wiki maintenance, and I guarantee to them that I will personally make sure that someone else on my team gets it done. The way we structure our maintenance is that we charge a flat rate per month, and then you don't have to worry about a thing. We will set our team loose on your server, and you won't even know what we're doing and when we're doing it. And if you don't notice that anything changed, that's a sign that we've been hard at work. That's a clear invitation for us to do absolutely nothing. But we do actually do stuff, and we send each client a report at the end of the month explaining what we did. And that's what we'll cover now. I'll explain how WikiTech maintains wikis, so you can also learn how to maintain your wiki like a pro, and then in all likelihood, you won't actually do it. To keep it from getting too boring, this will be more like an overview of wiki maintenance instead of being a tutorial. So let's begin. The version life cycle. First thing you need to know about regarding MediaWiki maintenance, very important. Take a look at this chart here. Half of you are looking at this and you're thinking, they released version 1.23. When did that happen? Where was I? So yes, we did. It was released around 6 years ago. I'm dating myself, but I've actually been around since version 1.10. In fact, I'm old enough to remember back when MediaWiki looked and acted pretty much the same it does now. We're actually right now at 1.34 with 1.35 coming up in June, although there may be a coronavirus related delay. And version 1.35 is a very important version, as you'll soon see. The reason you need to worry about your MediaWiki version is that while your version is supported, the MediaWiki core developers will actively release bug and security fixes for your version of MediaWiki. These are called minor releases, remember that term. So if you install 1.34.0, you'll see that after a few months, there will be a version 1.34.1, and that's a minor release. And you absolutely should install that once it's released. Why? Well, because over time, bugs are found and fixed, and even more important, security holes are found and patched up. And you don't want security holes hanging around your server, because that makes it more likely that hackers will get in and do whatever hackers do when they get control of your server. We actually had a VPS hacked a couple of weeks ago, and I assure you it was not fun. Fortunately, it was not a production VPS. You'll want to keep up to date with these releases soon after they come out. The good news is that doing minor updates is super easy, super quick, and relatively pain-free. So how will you know that a minor release has happened? So there's a mailing list called MediaWiki-announce, and you should subscribe to that, and you will get an email when the new release shows up. And once you get it, you should upgrade to it. You must. And if you don't, make sure that you hide your special version page so that nobody knows that you're a noob. Also, please do me a favor and don't check any of my own personal sites. So, LTS releases, as you can see, every 2 years. Those are the ones in kind of that orange color. And you'll see those come on schedule every 2 years. Major releases happen every 6 months. So that would be releases like 1.32, 1.33, 1.34. And as you can see, the upcoming one, 1.35, is going to be an LTS release, which makes it very important. And then there are minor releases, which are security and bug fixes, and those come approximately every quarter. So everyone wants to be on a supported version of MediaWiki, but obviously they don't support every version forever. How long is a MediaWiki version supported for? So the way that works is like this. There's a regular release that comes out every 6 months, and each of those releases is supported for 1 year. So you can kind of see in the green how they overlap. The green is showing when the release is considered stable and supported, and you can actually stay on these, the regular major releases. And let's say if you're on 1.32, you can instantly jump a version and go to 1.34 as soon as it's released, and you're still in safe territory. So they get released. So the major releases are every 6 months, and they're supported for a year. Obviously much easier. If you look at the orange, you'll see the long-term support releases. We'll call them LTS, and they overlap by a year. So that would in theory mean that you'll need to upgrade your MediaWiki version every year at a minimum if you're on a regular release. And you also have to stick to a very tight schedule. So major MediaWiki version upgrades are not so much fun, and they're often a pain. Trust me, you don't want to do a major version upgrade every year, and you don't have to, because every 4 releases, as you see, is in a long-term support version. Those versions are supported for every 3 years, and that gives you 1 year of overlap to upgrade. So you can wait after a few months, relax. The developers will find the bugs and fix them. More importantly, the extension authors will hopefully get their extensions up to date. And then after a few months, you can upgrade, and you still have a few months of breathing room. So here you can see a little bit more about the version lifecycle. We're currently on 1.34, that's the current stable version. 1.33, you're still okay. 1.32, you're not so okay. 1.31, that actually should be an LTS version, and that is still being supported. You can see on the left side, you can see some of the release notes. That's an outline of what release notes cover. So you should read those before you upgrade. There's a lot of useful information in there, including the new features, the bug fixes. Most importantly, you'll see toward the bottom, breaking changes. That'll tell you in advance what you can expect that your wiki, it will break in your wiki when you do the upgrade. So this is the Wiki apiary list of wikis using the 1.31 branch as of Monday, and that is the last long-term support branch. There are 1,538 wikis using that branch, and if that sounds high, it's really not so high. There are nearly as many wikis using 1.32, and that version is obsolete. And that means that as a community, we're not updating our wikis when we should. You'll see that by far the most popular minor versions are 1.3, 1.3, and 1.3, 1.1. What's so magical about those versions? Absolutely nothing. The reason they're popular is just that there was a lot of time between that release and the one that came after that. So if you look carefully, you'll see 1.3, 1.7, and it looks like there are 72 administrators who are on top of keeping their wikis upgraded. That was just released, and that's where everybody should be. But of course, it does take a little bit of time. And in some cases, it may never happen. And that's actually, to summarize what we learn from this chart, is that 1, there aren't enough wikis using the latest long-term support version. There should be many more. 2, administrators are installing MediaWiki and then basically never upgrading even to the next minor version, which as we said is actually pretty easy. And number 3, there are some administrators who are keeping on top of things. Now it's easy enough to blame the administrators for this, but the truth is it also speaks for a need that developers need to step up and make the upgrades easier. In WordPress, you can update by clicking a button, and actually it will do minor updates for you automatically and then email you to tell you that your WordPress installation has been upgraded. And that would be great. And actually at WikiTech, we're working on an extension that right now will upgrade your extensions, any Git hosted extensions, it will upgrade them for you when you click. And we're hoping, over time that it will become more capable, be able to maybe upgrade MediaWiki itself. We'll see what happens, but we are working about it. It hasn't been publicly released yet. I don't think it's ready for public release, but if you're interested, let me know, and then you'll be able to upgrade all of your Git extensions by clicking. All right. I put together a detailed list of who should be using specifically a long-term support version like 1.31 or 1.35. It's everyone. Every wiki should be on an LTS version and doing major version upgrades every 2 years and doing minor upgrades quarterly when they are released. Why do I say everyone? Because major version upgrades are a pain and you won't end up doing them every year, trust me. So you may not start out on an LTS version, but your first upgrade should be to an LTS version and then just upgrade every 2 years. Now, no solution really applies to everyone, but this is the rule. Everyone should be using an LTS version. And of course, like every rule, there are exceptions. So let's get to the exceptions. Who should not use a long-term support version? So those who have no dead light bulbs in their home, that person will probably upgrade every 6 months to a year. So you don't need the LTS version. Number 2, those who switch their Linux distro 3 times a week, those guys will probably be running nightly builds. Number 3, anybody who owns a Tesla. The rules for the rest of the world don't apply to you. You want the latest and greatest features, and you would never even think of buying a car that can't get a weekly software upgrade. And number 4 is those who haven't washed their car since they bought it. You're not going to do minor updates or any updates ever, so it makes no difference what version you install. In other words, you don't need to be on an LTS version. If you're really good at staying on top of upgrades, you're technically savvy, you must have the latest features, or you don't plan to ever update. So server updates. And server maintenance is not unique to MediaWiki. Your operating system and the packages in it also need to get updated. So unless your host does this for you, you want to keep on top of running updates to your operating system. And again, that's important for security. If you're running Windows, it's super easy. For Windows, you'll see an alert about it when it's time to upgrade. You'll click a bunch of times. You'll reboot. And since it's Windows, you'll never be able to run your server again. And actually, some installations will run the upgrade without even asking and then reboot itself at the most inconvenient time. And of course, possibly never come back up again. If you're using Linux, so you'll either do something like sudo yum update, sudo whatever that is, or sudo whatever. It's Linux, so there are many ways to do it and many passionate opinions of the best way. Server security. So you'll want to keep an eye on the server logs to make sure there's no funny business. Here's an example of a server access log. It looks complicated, and it is. We actually pulled this log at random from one of our servers, and some of you may be able to spot an attempted exploit just on this page, which covers about 20 minutes of access to a site that hasn't even launched yet. I'll give you a few seconds to look and see it. The bottom line is there are bots. They're searching for exploits all the time. If you run a wiki, there have already been many thousands of attempts to break in. And if you haven't been on top of your server security, consider yourself lucky, or consider yourself hacked, because someone may have already hacked your server and you may not even know. We'll talk a little bit about server monitoring. I know Greg will be speaking about this at length soon, so I'll keep this short, even though it's a very important topic. So one thing you want to do is watch your recent changes, go to special pages, then click recent changes. That's what they look like. You'll want to watch your wiki logs. Go to special pages, then click logs. And that's what they look like. And you'll see there are actually all kinds of logs, and they're all very important to look at once in a while. In particular, you'll want to look at your page creation log, your user creation log, and even if you have a locked down wiki, and it could be locked down to a certain extent, it reduces the need for checking recent changes in logs, but still a good idea to keep on top of it. Another thing you'll find yourself doing is running maintenance script. So the way that works, you run from your wiki root php maintenance / something.php. Don't actually run that. There is no script called something, but that's basically how all of the maintenance scripts get run. And if you want more information about these individual scripts and others, check out MediaWiki.org or Yaron's book. For example, in MediaWiki, so there's a job queue which can get very full. What that means is instead of immediately making changes in a wiki, this can be very confusing. So MediaWiki will put all of the changes it needs to make in a queue, and by default, it'll execute them one by one as people use the wiki, which means that over time, if you have especially a low traffic wiki, the job queue can get very full. And the more full it is, the more out of date your wiki's data will become. It'll also slow it down a bit, so it might be wise to actually execute this every night. It can be run manually, but you can actually set up a job to run this every night and execute the entire job queue, so every day you're starting off fresh. Another good script to know about is the sitemap generator. This is very handy if you want Google or other search engines to know about your site. I think there are still other search engines. You'll need to run it one time to generate the sitemap, then you'll need to tell Google about it, and then you'll need to run some kind of script set up to execute the, to generate the sitemap and keep it up to date occasionally. This is very good for something called SEO. I don't know very much about that, but I get like 15 emails a day about it, so it must be really, really good. Another good script to know about is create and promote. Users are really, really good at forgetting their password. And in theory, that's not a big deal because they can just reset it themselves. They click reset password and the wiki will send them an email where they can reset their password. The problem is that the other good thing, the thing that wiki users are very good at is changing their email and not being able to get into the old email, or just not knowing what to do. So you'll probably find yourself resetting passwords a lot, much more often than you'd like to, and this script will help you do it. It's also useful if someone else asks you to help with their wiki and you want to be able to create your own account and give yourself full privileges. As long as you have access to the back end, you can magically do that for yourself. It'll help you create a new user account, promote a new or existing user, set or change a password. And for more details, you can actually run this with the help parameter and it'll give you some basic ideas. Sometimes you'll find you need to delete a whole bunch of pages. That could be because a spammer set loose on your wiki, or it could be that a clueless user created or imported a whole bunch of pages erroneously. That clueless user could actually be you sometimes. So how do you fix it? You use delete batch, and you can either specify which pages you want deleted, or you can give it a file. It sets the user account that will do it, the reason, and it'll throttle it so it doesn't completely slow down your wiki. Semantic Media Wiki maintenance, for those of you using Semantic Media Wiki. So the way you get access it is you go to special pages and you go to dashboard. That's in SMW version 3. In earlier versions, it was called SMW admin. From there, you'll find a tab, oddly enough, called maintenance. And there are a bunch of tasks that you can do easily. It actually looks really good in version 3 and does a lot of useful stuff. And also, there's one script that you should know about, which is rebuild data. Very useful, and you may want to run a full data rebuild every night to make sure that your data is always up to date with the latest semantic data. And if your data is too big to run this every night, you can actually run a partial rebuild every night or every so often. Performance tuning. So this is a good thing to keep on top of. You'll want to watch the server load, tune the web server, tune the database server, tune your caches if you don't, if you have the caches. If you don't, you might want to look into installing some caches. And backups. Very important to keep a backup. You could either do a full server / VPS backup, or a backup of the MediaWiki file system and the database. Always good to store this off-site, and to perform a test restore periodically to make sure that it's actually being backed up and that you actually know how to restore it when needed. There's a tool called Auto MySQL Backup that'll help you with backing up the database at least. It can run on Windows, it can run on Linux. It can be scheduled to run daily, weekly, monthly. It's got a backup rotation feature and some other cool stuff. And actually, WikiTech has a backup script that we do it. It'll automatically check your local settings for you, figure out which database needs to be backed up, and they'll back it up for you on a schedule. Very easy to use, and it works with certain wiki farms too. So we used that in combination with the extension upgrader to help make our maintenance easier. And hopefully at some point in the future, the two of them together may be able to automate all wiki upgrades, which would be very nice. And of course, Auto MySQL Backup will only help you with the database. You'll want to back up your file system as well. And also very important, have an emergency plan in place. So you have to know what can go wrong. A list of things that can go wrong with your wiki. Can Parsoid go down and therefore the visual editor won't work? And can the web server go down? Can people hack into it? So a list of what can actually go wrong. And for each one, who is the person who can fix that issue? And does that person have the appropriate access to be able to fix the issue? And you don't want to find that out when there's a problem and the person who can fix the issue is not able to do it. And then number 4, what will happen while the issue is being fixed? Presumably it'll take a little bit of time until the issue gets fixed. So is there a backup plan while the emergency plan is being executed? Is there some sort of alternate server that people can be redirected to? If you're running varnish cache, it can keep on serving old pages to not logged in users for a while. So there are different ways to mitigate the issue while there's something going wrong. So what's the next best thing that can still be happening?
We have about 4 minutes left.
All right. So I'm ready for questions then.
Well, perfect. Okay. So I see that Rich has his hand up, but that may have been from before. Rich, did you have a question? I see the hand is now down, but Bernard has a question.
Yes, hi. That was very interesting, but I'm not so sure if if I can follow your recommendation for doing nightly updates for rebuild data on Semantic Media Wiki, because Semantic Media Wiki in version 3 uses the job queue for the upgrade. So if you have continuously run your job queue, I don't think it should be necessary to run that every night.
Yes, I know in theory there are a number of tools that are supposed to keep the dependencies in place in Semantic Media Wiki. I don't know, my personal thing that I'm finding at least is that things still do tend to get out of date. So you may not find that you need it, but if you do find you need it, that would be how to do it.
Okay.
Joel.
Yeah, sorry about that. I've been away from the MediaWiki, Semantic MediaWiki community for a while, but I'm just wondering if PostgreSQL has really matured, because I noticed you still mentioning MySQL. Is there any recommendation if I should deploy to PostgreSQL, which is actually my preferred database?
Sorry, Cindy, can you repeat the question? I wasn't able to hear it.
He's asking about using PostgreSQL rather than MySQL.
I think it's still supported. I don't remember where that is right now. Maybe someone else knows.
I could actually answer that question. Yes, there is support for Postgres in MediaWiki Core. It is by far, though, not used as much as MySQL is.
Okay, thank you. I mean, in terms of production deployments, is it safe to deploy on Postgres?
I always like to stay with the safe option.
Okay.
Your own.
Yaron, you're muted.
Yes, I am. I was just launching into my long question too. Hi. Obviously, it's never good to have local changes to the software because it makes upgrading a lot more difficult. But if people do have local changes or require local changes to the functionality, do you have any tips on how to make their lives easier in the long run?
Sure. And yes, I will need to emphasize again, don't do it. But sometimes it's necessary. If you do, the way to track the changes, really the best way is to do it with Git. Make yourself a branch. If you have a Git repo, make yourself a branch and commit all your changes to that branch. And then you can keep on updating it with the actual branch over time and making sure it stays up to date and also that your changes don't get lost. If that's too complicated, so then at a minimum, maybe even keep it in a text file, but put the version that you based your changes on. So what version of that software? If it was an extension, maybe the Git commit ID, the hash, figure out which version it was that you based your changes on, and then store that somewhere so that when you upgrade, you'll be able to do a diff and be able to figure out what you actually changed. And of course, putting comments in the code will help also.
Great, thank you.
I think I see Joel's hand re-raised.
Yeah, sorry about that. I have a follow-up, actually. Of late, people have been doing this DevOps and Ops deployment patterns. Is container support, Dockerized type deployments, something that you see in the community?
Yeah, we have some people who are using Docker. I don't have enough experience with it to answer how well it goes.
I could probably take that one too. There is increasing use of Docker, actually both inside the foundation as well as outside for use of MediaWiki. It's still, I would say, outside sort of nascent. It's coming. but there are people, I know that there's a, well, on Docker Hub, there is a official release of MediaWiki in Docker for the supported versions. I've also got an experimental project on GitHub under my user space for building wiki farms where I can have side-by-side versions of MediaWiki running. Each in a wiki farm, so you can have multiple wikis on multiple versions of MediaWiki side by side to test things. So, and I think, and also we're going to get a talk. Well, tomorrow Adam Shortland's going to be talking about Wikibase, but he's also going to likely have some Docker Create Camp discussions. So absolutely, we could discuss that a little bit more as far as what's actually happening with Docker.